haven't seen it yet. That the Armenian community has awoken. We don't want this for our kids, not today, not tomorrow, not next week. We're done.
LAUSD, stop grooming our kids. LAUSD, stop grooming our kids. Mr. Superintendent, we pay for your salary. Shame on you. Shame on LAUSD. Shame on LAUSD. Shame on LAUSD.
LAUSD apparently has lots of problems. One of them is grooming children. Where have you heard that before? Well, from crazed folks who think these things are happening because education and also the whole thing about parental choice. We'll get into that in a second. But these anti-LGBTQ protests are now happening. This happened over the weekend, right before the weekend, outside of Satakoy Elementary School in North Hollywood. They have a problem with the curriculum that's going on. And these protesters came with this whole thing about saving the children. Save the children. We know how those types of that rhetoric runs, but many times it's empty. They want to keep their kids away from sex education. Now, I think everyone that dealt in sex education when they were children, they understood that they had options. But what's a bad argument if you're gonna have the full story? Here's the rest of the story. From Knock LA, they point this out. Many of these protesters seem to be unaware of the LAUSD policy that allows parents to opt their children out of sexual education, which is what they're complaining about. When it was first taught to students in the 5th grade. Or that the LAUSD does not actually have the power to stop parents, this is the odd part, from teaching their own children about the topic, how and when they decide on their own. It's almost like LAUSD must be run up in people's houses and snatching their children out and going, they're gonna be in class all day learning about sexual education and you have no right to stop me whatsoever. Weird, because that's not what's happening. A reporter also noted some of the other reasons that they were doing things like this. A planned reading of a children's book that they thought was also indoctrinating children. Here's that. Claire Harder points out, parents are specifically protesting a planned reading of The Great Big Book of Families. That sounds threatening, which talks about all forms of families, multiracial, multi-religious, single parents, and contains one reference to families with same-sex parents. One reference. Maybe they had a problem with the single parent talk because anytime any politician or conservative pundits like to talk about single parents, they like to say that's destroying kids and anyone that had one is at a disadvantage and will never make it in life. Many times it's the folks that they don't like, just to dog them out further. But still, this rhetoric that they're pushing over and over again has even led to what got worse here in this situation. You know, when folks are out here protesting and there's counter protesters, things like this go down.
You should have hanged yourself. You should have died in the closet.
Police also surrounding that whole scuffle that was going down. I'm not sure if they were snatching people off, had tasers and guns out ready to stop the folks that are pushing violence because of their misplaced anger that they don't know where else to put it. But they did find an unhoused man. They figured, hey, nobody's gonna care if we beat him up. That happened as well, watch this.
I
want to press charges against him. I saw him.
He has to suffer. That's not taking Karma's a bitch, and it's going after you.
Apparently, karma's a bitch and it's going after you. These are the folks that apparently said they were victims. They want to press charges on the guy. Again, the video, the actual event of that fight that occurred with that unhoused man wasn't caught. So we can go off of maybe what people were saying and maybe the fact he's on the ground half dead. But still, Catherine, the chaos agent, tweeted this out as far as her perspective on it. She says, help if you can, comrades. Fundraiser for the unhoused man brutalized by fascists at the Satakoy Elementary Pride protest. So it makes you ask yourself this question, Burbank. What is the purpose of showing up at a school talking about books, talking about how they're indoctrinating our children, there's grooming going on. We can't stop them from teaching them about sexual education, even though it's right there in black and white, but we can also beat people up and hope that maybe what comes of that? A change of policy, terrorism. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, different kinds of families exist. That can be an awkward conversation for some folks, JR, right? To say, I know you saw all these different kinds of families in the book, because then your kid's gonna come home. And the kid's gonna come home and ask mom and dad, why do we all look the same? And then they're gonna have to explain that they're second cousins. And that's an awkward conversation, JR. I'm just kidding. That's an understudied problem, but not the problem at hand. Okay, I think it's this idea that it's grooming, right? That we're grooming kids. That is coercive. Grooming is coercive. Telling people that multiracial families and that gay families and families of parents who are separated and maybe have remarried, that families can look different. That's not coercive. Just letting people exist is not coercive. Grooming typically refers to you trying to persuade and normalize someone that an inappropriate relationship is normal. That's what grooming refers to. So by them using this word, they're basically saying, we just think gay relationships and multiracial relationships are inappropriate. That's what they're saying. And they don't want their kids to be aware of those. That's ridiculous. That is a fascist ideology. But they don't want to admit to that. And then to brutalize a homeless person who's in the vicinity of their protest is just insanity. It shows the mental level that these people are at, I think.
Well, when you realize that you're on the wrong side of an argument, or you're the bad guy when it comes to these things, because violence keeps popping up whenever you show up to protest and protect your children, then you have to come up with straw man arguments. You have to say, oh, they're coming for this, they're coming for that, because you just want to get your violence out there. You're angry about everything else, and you just come with all these weird conspiracy theories about what is it people are trying to do. LAUSD is looking to indoctrinate children because they have nothing better to do, because LAUSD's plan across this entire huge statewide amount of kids involved in this one school district, their sole purpose is to indoctrinate your children. Just in an election year, just once Republicans start talking about it. Well, how come they weren't doing this 10 years ago? How come they were doing this 20 years ago? What happened with LAUSD and apparently every other school district across the country, according to these folks, that would push them to this point? Like, the logical thought process never matches up with the amount of anger and hate that comes with it. Apparently they have no control over their children, what they're seeing. That's the lie that they'll tell.
Yeah, it's absurd. I love the idea of parents being involved in schools, because the real problem with our curriculum is not that we teach about different kinds of families, not that we say sometimes people are gay, sometimes there are multiracial families. That's not the problem with our curriculum. The problem with our curriculum is that it's not relevant to the world we live in. We don't teach history. We don't teach actual history of the country and what we've done around the world to the people who have to grow up and be citizens in this country and vote for politicians who will make our foreign policy. We don't teach economics, yet every person who goes to American public school has to be a participant in our economic system. Those are things that are really good reasons for people to be protesting, that their kids are not getting a real education. But instead we're focused on the gays because it's Pride Month. It's so 100%. Absurd. I went for a hike yesterday, JR, and there was like an arch that was kind of cool. It was very peaceful. And someone graffitied on the arch, "Save trans kids." And I was like, is this someone saying we need to save kids from parents who affirm them as being trans? Or was this someone saying save trans kids from parents like the ones at the school? And I honestly didn't know.
I feel like with being an archway, someone was probably thinking as far as like a flag or a rainbow type of thing. That would be my assumption, especially I guess when it comes to this lib place we call LA. But again, this happened in North Hollywood. So yeah, the thought process that there's this is overrun with all these folks who think the bastardization of our children is the way to go from their perspective. It's just not always the case. Lastly, there was one teacher there at the school. After this happened on Friday, some folks then broke into the school and targeted specifically a trans teacher's pride flag. Here's the headline from that LGBTQ plus pride flag was burned at that same school, and that trans teacher had to be removed over safety concerns, had to get escorted out. When you look up and you ask yourself, am I the good guy or the bad guy? When you find yourself forcing certain folks to be escorted out for their safety, you might want to wake up a little bit. Can't use the word woke, any form of it, because that's wrong.